CMO likes to provoke and say that advertising is dead, and it really all is about experiences.
Right.
I think this idea of sort of mass marketing may be dead.
Yeah.
It
Yeah,
really
niche is the new mass, because it's like, speak to me, speak to my passions. And also, like, this idea of buying female audience 25 to 54 or whatever, I also think is dead, right? Because it's like, who cares? Like, I'm a cook, I'm a writer, I'm a this, I'm a that. And I
That's
think
right.
that people are defining themselves a lot more by those passion points.
Yeah.
Well, welcome to the Brand Innovators podcast. Jay, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
We're here at Mastercard. We appreciate you having us.
Yeah, I call it the cruise ship.
I love it. It is kind of like a cruise ship. There's a buffet. We're here in the spirit of AI, and I kind of wanted to talk to you a little bit about, obviously you've worked for Mastercard for a long time, and you've had a long and storied career across many different brands as well. What is the difference? Because something feels different in the air today when we're talking about innovation and transformation and change, because we have these tools of AI. So how are you thinking about this in your role? And I know that's a very broad answer, but like, how are you thinking about this from a marketer's perspective today?
Yeah, first of all, I just feel because of all this technological innovation that's happening, there's never been a better time to be in marketing. And I think anyone that doesn't feel that probably shouldn't be in the space right now.
Right.
We like to say that, the world has never moved this fast, but it's never going to move this slow again.
Right.
And that is an opportunity for us to just rethink how we go to market and how we make the sausage, if you will. We feel like this is such an amazing time to start to think about things that we probably never thought of. And
Absolutely.
ultimately our remits are expanding, and that's really exciting. Our team, which is a global media team, just spent the last 2 years building an app. And so now we are in kind of the app development production business. And you
Wow.
wouldn't think of that from a media team.
Okay. Is
But
this what launched yesterday?
This was,
Do you want to
yeah.
talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so this is our small business AI mentor. It is an AI-driven chatbot, and the idea is that we can provide mentorship at scale. Mastercard has spent a lot of time and effort focused on small business and especially underrepresented entrepreneurs.
Sure.
And we had this great insight in that, most small businesses fail within the first year, especially underrepresented entrepreneurs when they start businesses. They don't have that mentorship, and people that have walked in their shoes and really kind of understood what a lot of these mentors are, or what a lot of these folks are dealing with. And so we realized that technology could probably help solve this, and AI could help solve this, but AI itself is somewhat biased. And so this is what we set out to fix for ourselves. This was our brief to ourselves. Like, how do we actually create something within AI that was inclusive but authentic to us? And small business was something that was authentic to us. We spent 2 years building this. Why the media team actually decided to build this is because we really thought that we could work with a media coalition to help train a new AI model for us. And so we have amazing Mastercard content, but then we worked with a big coalition of media partners to help train this model.
Wow. That's really interesting. So how practically would someone use it?
Yeah, so if you are either starting a business or even if you're kind of more mature as a business, it is essentially, just a tool where you can start to ask any sort of question, business question, depending on kind of what life stage you're on. So if you are starting a business, you can ask it, kind of questions. I'm thinking of starting a flower shop in, so-and-so zip code. And I, have questions about the viability of this or that. It answers, questions just as if you were talking to, a mentor or, a VC funder, and ultimately it helps with all of those questions that you have, either starting a business, managing day-to-day business, and ultimately helps connect you even to real life mentors and kind of figuring out kind of not only the virtual, but the physical as well.
Interesting. And so it will actually, it can provide you connections into your community.
Correct.
So I'm looking for a financial planner, or I'm looking for
Correct.
a carpenter or whatever, and it can kind of connect you to those services.
Yeah. And we've been spending a lot of time training it and making sure that it really is inclusive and kind of understands kind of your background, what you're dealing with. One of the common questions that we are hearing through some of our focus groups is around funding and grants. And it's different depending on who you are, where you live,
What type of business.
what type of business, what geography.
Yeah.
And, we have we've kind of built it to ensure that it can kind of work across all different types of situations.
Well, congrats. That's very exciting.
Yeah, we are excited.
That's cool. I mean, I guess how else, obviously, like Mastercard is a very large and important organization, and it has so many different complexities. And AI is new, and it can be used for good, or it can be used, potentially. There's a dark side to it as well. So, how are you guys thinking about, like, okay, well, how do we use it at work? How do we use it for consumers? How do we use it for data? How do we, like, what's the sort of thought process there, while you can stay within guardrails of making sure that, like, we're not going to the dark side of AI, but we're using it for good? How are you thinking about that?
Yeah, I mean, we are really trying to apply it to all different parts of our business. I would say probably the first use cases tend to be around productivity. I'll give you a good use case. Part of what our group does is focus on our brand governance. As you can imagine, being in 100 plus countries, and we put out a decent amount of content on a day-to-day basis. We're very we have a very strict brand architecture. But as you get farther and farther away from the
HQ, or
HQ,
yeah.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
people are moving very
Yep.
quickly. Sometimes you put out content that may not be fully aligned with the brand guidelines. We have a team of 2 people that have been doing this for the past 5 years. Working around the clock, getting all of the brand specs and kind of information in from the teams, and
Mm-hmm.
it's really manual and hard. Now, with the use of AI, not only can we empower that team that's working on it to evaluate everything much quicker, but we can put these sorts of tools in the hands of all of our marketers, and it can, automatically govern all of that content before it goes out.
Wow, that's like that. I mean, that makes it frees up your team to be more creative because you take the manual pieces. That's how I've
That's a
found it
great
to
way
be
to
the
frame that. I
best.
think,
Yeah.
that is the promise
Right. It's
of,
like human creativity is unlocked because we can
yes.
take the things that are
Yeah.
keeping us up at
We were
night
actually
off of
just
our
talking
plate.
about that on a panel earlier today. Kind of this
Awesome.
blend between kind of the human
Yeah,
and the technology.
sure.
And ultimately, it's not AI that's going to take your job.
Yeah.
It's your colleague that
That
really
knows
understands how
how
to
to use
leverage.
it. Yeah, it's interesting because I don't know if you've played around with it and tried to have it write something for you, for example. It
Yeah,
writes really poorly,
right.
but if you can prompt it with the right prompts and the right voice, then you can put in and you can write it first. It can help to augment what you're writing,
I
for
think that's
example.
exactly right. I think
Yeah,
that's exactly right. Ultimately, what comes out is as a good first draft. It's anodyne,
it's anodyne.
but it's a good thought
Yeah,
partner, and you're not starting
exactly.
with a blank page.
That's right. It's like it's the end of writer's block, sort of,
Yes, yes.
I want to shift gears a little bit and talk to you about consumers and like what's shifting today. I think it's obvious that consumers are sort of they're changing. They're going from more like material items potentially that they're purchasing to more experiences, and I just read an article that people are starting to ramp up their going out to dinner again and traveling big again and spending bigger sums of money at my husband's in the restaurant industry, and the days of the big restaurant are back. And so I guess I wanted to talk to you about, like, what are the patterns that you're seeing in consumer spending, and how are you guys thinking about that?
I think you're right on in terms of consumers wanting experiences. What we're finding is that the best way for brands to connect is to surprise and delight consumers with priceless experiences. Ultimately, it's not about kind of buying the physical products. It's about creating kind of these things that they wouldn't be able to do otherwise. Kind of this idea of sort of maximizing memories is something that we think about.
Hmm.
Um, I think where AI starts to play into that, there's a future here where, we are all going to have our AI agents do a lot of that grunt work, if you will, for us,
Right.
which could be, some of that daily or weekly shop.
Hmm.
And ultimately, kind of as marketers, we have to be predictive in, kind of meeting those consumer needs before they even know what they are. We always like to talk about, kind of marketers as being, kind of consumer centric and, that consumer centricity of marketing. And it's not enough now to just have great, amazing consumer insights. We actually have to be able to predict
Predict.
those consumer insights.
Yeah.
And then ultimately, as consumers start to kind of offload a lot of their daily choices in
Yeah.
terms of what their buying
Hmm.
decisions
Hmm.
to that algorithm, how do you start to get into that algorithm and ultimately create that preference
Mm-hmm.
for consumers to ensure that the way that they're building that algorithm is about the preference and the power of that brand. And so, I mean, I just think that over the last 10 to 15 years, as we as an industry have figured out how to leverage data,
Mm-hmm.
we might have over-indexed a little bit just on the data aspect and kind of going right down to the lower funnel.
Yeah.
Just because we
Yep.
have that data, you know, it's wonderful that we have the ability now to kind of connect through that purchase funnel. But ultimately, I think we're going to see a return to the power of brand and being
Mm-hmm.
able to surprise and delight consumers
Yeah, that's
with experience.
interesting. That's really interesting. Especially as we're looking toward a younger generation that cares more about that, I think, or doesn't, not that they care more, but they want that. They want to be wowed. Um, and I think, you know, it's so interesting because Mastercard priceless, that is like a campaign, not even a campaign, that is in your DNA, and that is so relevant to how people think about spending today. I think when we look at like our parents' generation or our grandparents' generation, it was more about like, post depression era, collecting more things and sort of owning more and sort of like, you know, protecting yourself a little bit more. And
Mm.
I think we've moved, and this could be a function of COVID, but I think we were shifting this way anyway into more of that like experiences, memories. Is that what you said? Memories unlocked or something,
Yeah,
something
sort of
like that.
like maximizing like
Maximizing your
amazing
memories.
memories. Yeah.
And so you guys were already like doing this, which is so interesting. And now I think you're spot on maybe we did go to bottom of the funnel and we need to go back to the top and inspire people. And we need to, remember brand again. And we need to remember what gets people going, what gets them excited, and I think that's cool that you've sort of positioned yourself there. I guess, how do you think about storytelling and brand in this new ecosystem with these younger Gen Alphas, Gen Xers, all the platforms that they're on, all the content they're consuming? Like, how are you thinking of reaching them at that brand level?
Yeah, I mean, we really start to think about kind of tentpole experiences, and then kind of how to curate those experiences. We have a lot of partnerships and sponsorships. We just signed an amazing deal with McLaren, and now we're kind of in the F1 space.
Cool.
We have relationships with the Grammys. We're in kind of the music space there. We also have the Brits in the UK.
Cool.
We have other sports. We have a relationship with PGA. One of our initial sponsorships is with Major League Baseball. And so,
And like a lot of music too, like a
yes,
lot of music talent, which is, and
exactly.
young creators.
So
And
we have really started to take a step back, understand the passions and the passion points, these universal passion points around culinary, around travel, around music, around sports. And then how do we take, kind of positions with big partners in these spaces and then curate these amazing experiences, kind of
very
pre,
cool.
during, post. And a lot of it is on the ground, but then it's really how do you bring everybody into that? I think one of the great things with social is that, you have the ability now to bring more people into this and where these conversations are happening, around the Grammys is not just on the ground of the Grammys, but
Sure, of
it's
course.
happening all on social. And so how do we kind of create these experiences where we're part of this cultural zeitgeist and part of these conversations and ultimately part of these communities?
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense, especially again, as you're trying to reach this new generation that's up and coming and maybe isn't seeing a priceless commercial on TV anymore, the way I saw them,
Yeah.
but they're, experiencing it through all of these key, passions.
Our CMO likes to provoke and say that advertising is dead, and it really
Hmm.
all is about experiences.
Right.
I think when you unpack that a little bit further, I think this idea of sort of mass marketing may be dead.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
really
Niche
is.
is the
Yeah.
new mass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Niche is a new mass. I think
Hmm.
that's exactly right.
Yeah, because it's like, speak to me, speak to my passions. And also, like, this idea of buying female audience 25 to 54 or whatever, I also think is dead, right? Because it's like, who cares? Like, I'm a cook, I'm a writer, I'm a this, I'm a that. And I
That's
think
right.
that people are defining themselves a lot more by those passion points.
Yeah, and I think one of the promises of AI is sort of kind of mass personalization. We have amazing data.
Hmm.
I'm not sure for the past 10, 15 years we've been able to truly get the proper signals from all that noise.
Right.
And now I think AI
Can
gives
help
us
that.
that promise to be able to personalize
Hmm.
properly. I
Yeah.
think without it being creepy, without and
Right.
to do it in a way that I think really provides incremental value.
Yeah. And I think people appreciate that and are willing to engage with a brand when it's, you know, when it's more, and I hate to use this overused word authentic, but when it is more a part of that, like you're speaking to me about something I care about, it's a different thing to a consumer than when you're just speaking to me as if I'm this blanket audience.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's right. I think we forget that all the science suggests that, kind of emotional work, emotional advertising, emotional experiences, especially when you can connect on multisensory, all the senses, is truly how you start to create those bonds with the consumers that we serve. And,
Yeah.
and I think we've been so focused on this data and
Mhm.
ultimately kind of like bottom of the funnel that I think as
We've lost
marketers,
that.
yeah, we've
Yeah.
lost that a little
Yeah,
bit.
I think that makes sense. I'd love to switch gears a little bit and just you've again you've had a very long career and successful career, and I'd love to just get an understanding from you of if you were looking back and you were giving your 22, 25-year-old self advice, what advice would you give yourself?
I would give myself the advice of stay curious. I think the one thing that will separate us from everybody else and ultimately from even AI is our ability to have curiosity. It's our curiosity quotient, kind of CQ, and then ultimately that EQ that will separate us. Kind of IQ is almost democratized now.
Right.
And I think, when we were kind of coming up in the business, it was, you want to make sure that you really understand your craft. You're learning everything you possibly
Sure.
can.
Yep.
And now that's almost price of entry. I think,
Right.
what's really going to separate us is our ability to connect with each other as
Connect
humans.
dots.
Yeah. And then connect dots. That's
Yeah.
that curiosity bit.
Mhm.
Our ability to really kind of start to kind of look around the corner
Yeah.
and kind of see what is coming.
Mhm.
And I think, this idea of, brands needing to be predictive, I think consumers and, ultimately us as workers,
Yeah.
in the marketing community need to stay curious so we
Yeah.
understand kind of where this is all heading.
I think that's true. I also, I think that what's the phrase? You learn, earn, return,
Oh,
right? You
yes,
learn when
yes.
you're young, you earn in your middle years, and then at the end of your career and your life, you return and you give back and you donate and you spend time coaching and advising. And I think that that goes to that point of like being curious and continuing to learn and learn and learn and learn and wanting to do that throughout the entire course of your career.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I think also just being willing to push yourself into very uncomfortable territories. You know, I got this advice when I was younger, thinking about as you are kind of career pathing, whether that is on the agency side or on the brand side. Um, we are realizing that, tomorrow looks nothing like today. And I think your ability to kind of put yourself in a position that is uncomfortable where you really don't know what you're doing and to be vulnerable and say, I am going into this space. I need to rely on the people around me. And I want to raise my hand and say that I'm not the expert here, even though I may
mhm.
be managing a team.
Yeah.
You all know a lot more than me
Yeah.
and I want to learn. But I can bring, kind of what I can bring to the business and have confidence in, kind of the skills that you have and in yourself to be a fast learner and to
Mhm.
understand, like you said, connect those dots of, kind of what you've learned and how to apply it to this new opportunity. But I think
Yeah,
kind
it's
of pushing yourself
interesting.
is huge.
When I was graduating school and kind of growing up, it was all about the years of experience in the exact type of job, and you were looking for like the person who's done that job and they've had that experience and and I think, and I'd love your thoughts on this as a manager, like as you're looking to hire people, is that so important anymore, or is it the curiosity, the hunger, the human relatability that is in somebody over their on paper experience?
I would say yes. Again, you need to have a blend of both, depending on what the role is. But we are finding that, the people that are most successful here, have the ability to transfer to different roles throughout the company. And as you start to gain that experience, it is that net sum of all that experience that makes you so powerful in the
Mhm.
company.
Sure.
Because then, as you say, you can connect
Yeah,
many more dots.
absolutely. Have you had a time where you've had to sort of transition or pivot or, like you said, do something really uncomfortable where you were like, "Oh, like, this part of me or this thing that I thought I was, or I thought I was really I was rigid about that my career path needed to look like this, and instead I'm actually over here and I don't know what I'm doing." Like, can you tell me about a time that you've maybe had to transform in that way?
Yeah, when I made the move from agency over to brand, I thought that I could take the majority of my skill sets and transfer it. I kind of grew up on the agency side, first 13 years of my career, all focused on media. And so I was a subject matter expert within media. And I still was a media subject matter expert on the client side. But ultimately, the purview
It's
widened.
totally different.
It
Yeah.
completely widened.
Mm-hmm.
And what I was expected to do on a day-to-day basis was completely different. And I had to rely on different skill sets. And I was really unprepared, quite
Mm-hmm.
frankly,
Mm-hmm.
for what that meant. When I was going into these meetings and sitting with our brand managers or sitting with a procurement team or a finance team, what was being asked of me was completely different. And I realized that I was just, in a completely new depth and, quite frankly, out of my depth for quite some time. And so, again, kind of this idea of being vulnerable, I thought was something I wish somebody would have told me.
Right. It's okay. It's
It's
okay
okay
to not
not to know
know
everything.
and to ask questions and to be like, hey guys, so sorry, what does that acronym mean? Or whatever it might
Yeah,
be.
exactly. That is such a great point. This idea of asking questions, somehow it was just in my mind that
You
you
just
couldn't,
fake it till you
yeah,
make
you
it.
couldn't ask questions. Like that was a sign of weakness.
Yeah.
And it's exactly the opposite. Being able to ask questions and being open to asking those questions in front of everybody actually makes you much stronger.
Absolutely. Yeah. That
Yeah.
makes a ton of sense.
And quite frankly, what I turned into, maybe something of a deficit has now become a superpower. What I realized is that I liked this sort of, kind of uncomfortable space that companies were going through, what we were calling kind of this digital transformation. When I went over, from the agency, the first client side job I had was at Unilever. And, ultimately what was required, what the job became was digital transformation. And, my role was to completely transform our go-to-market from, something that was more 30-second based to more digital based.
Yeah.
And then that led to, how we think about, all aspects of the marketing ecosystem,
Mm-hmm.
the agencies that we use, the way that we
Mm-hmm.
pay them.
Yep.
Even thinking about, we had an arm, sort of a finance arm, a VC arm, that was focused on, more kind of like packaged goods sort of financing. What we realized is that, this was a completely new area for us where we could start to take positions, kind of into digital companies.
Mm.
And so it actually completely re reimagined what media could be
Mm-hmm.
inside an organization,
Yeah.
and that became my more north star.
Yeah.
So I realized that is what I loved best,
Right.
working at companies that were going through massive transformations, and how I could think about all of the new technology to create a completely different business model and different marketing model of how we go to market and how we really think about
Yeah.
uh, you know
Yeah. It's like
really
the
thinking
thing
about
that
our consumers much differently.
right. It's like the thing that you're unsure of if you have the experience is
Yeah.
actually ends up becoming
Yeah, that
the thing
became
that
my
you
thing.
yeah, that's awesome.
And that's how I got the job here.
I love that. I want to end on one question about next year. And I guess, we're going into a new year. What has you excited for the next 12 months?
Yeah. One, I actually really am excited about this pace of change. I love this idea that, kind of tomorrow looks nothing like today. And if you can think it, you can do it. And, I've kind of spent my whole media career chasing this old Wanamaker saying of, I know half of my
Half my
I
advertising is
just don't know
wasted.
what half. And we have the tools now to solve that. And
Yeah,
so, as I have daily conversations with my finance team, I am excited to tackle that.
that's cool.
Yeah.
You never hear marketers that love to talk to their finance team, but hey, we found one. So cool. Well, thank you, Jay. I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate
Absolutely.
it.